This would be the night. After a campaign lasting more than 3 decades, the University of Minnesota's new library was ready to be dedicated and named for 90-year-old former Governor Elmer L. Andersen.
I just wish I could summon words adequate to the occasion. It is absolutely an overwhelming experience, and I'm just so grateful I don't know how to express it, and humbly proud to have my name on this building. It's a spectacular building. It's a wonderful building, and an honor beyond words to have this great structure and what it'll mean in service dedicated in my name. Thank you very much.
Elmer L. Andersen, a man of unfailing commitment to service and the common good, as a businessman, philanthropist, and governor of Minnesota. A man who has been an unwavering champion of education and the University of Minnesota, where he brought his wisdom and judgment to several terms on the Board of Regents. And a man who loves books, whose personal collection had grown to contain thousands, some of which are extremely rare. Who better to honor for a long lifetime of leadership? What better decision than to name a library for him?
Tonight we're celebrating the grand opening of the newest library on the University of Minnesota campus. This, however, as you know by now, if many of you have toured, this is no ordinary library. The library is home to the university's treasures, its rare books, special collections, and archives, the Minnetex Library Information Network, and the Minnesota Library Access Center, the caves, which I hope, if you didn't have an opportunity to see the caves, do it after this program. You must. It is quite an adventure.
The caves. No, this is no ordinary library. Located in the heart of the university's Twin Cities campus, the Andersen Library is designed for the storage and preservation of archival materials in vast underground caverns. Here, many library collections from the university and other state organizations could be brought together in one accessible place and stored in conditions designed for long-term preservation. Good libraries are critical to the mission of a university, and the University of Minnesota has 5 major library facilities and 11 branch libraries. Campus libraries are usually devoted to collections of books and other materials and services that are intended to be accessed frequently. But every organization, every discipline, every university has its own collections of materials that are not accessed regularly, yet need to be preserved for their research and historical value. Books, newspapers, documents, drawings. Those materials consume space, and when campus space is limited, archival and other important collections and lesser-used materials may be assigned to off-campus storage locations. This has been generally the case for universities around the country. Collections have been housed in whatever buildings or spaces were available, sometimes many miles off campus. Besides being difficult for university students and researchers to access, a more critical problem has been the storage or warehousing of these materials in conditions not designed for their long-term preservation.
It took 19th century incarnations of these. There's something going on.
It's all about paper and preserving the treasures written, printed, or drawn upon it. The enemies of paper are several. Humidity, too much or too little. High temperature. Air, stagnant air that permits mildew to form. Acids present in the paper, or acids that can leach into the paper from wood, cardboard, or the air itself. And light. For preservationists, total control of all these factors is the goal. In the land of continuously changing weather conditions, that kind of control is a major challenge.
The least expensive way that you can preserve paper-based collections like the archives is to keep them in hospitable environmental control, which means basically as cool a temperature as you can tolerate for human comfort and a relatively humid space. The humidity is important because it keeps brittle paper pliable so that it doesn't age as fast. Trying to build a space like that above ground in Minnesota would be very complicated because the conditions get so severe in the wintertime that maintaining the kind of relative humidity that we need in a facility like this in the winter would be almost impossible.
Over the decades, new archival materials were continuously added to the university's collection. And by the 1990s, the burgeoning, bulging collections created pressure for action on putting up some kind of building. But there was another factor that helped move the decision along. A radical idea for a building that would consume a minimal amount of scarce campus real estate and yet provide several football fields worth of storage space. Space in which ideal preservation conditions could be created.
In fact, it was two of Chuck's colleagues in the Underground Space Center here at the university who about 11 years ago now were making a presentation to the university architect, and the university architect invited me to come and sit in on the meeting. They were talking about the application of mine space for parking expansion on the campus, and in the course of their comments mentioned just sort of in passing that the natural environment in the caverns was 57 degrees Fahrenheit year-round and about 70% relative humidity. And I perked up immediately because those conditions are very close to ideal conditions for the preservation of paper. So when we commissioned a pre-design study of the building in 1990, one of the things I asked that architect to do was to try out at least one version of the building using mine space to see if that was feasible.
Mine space. Go underground and use the space inside the bluffs of the Mississippi River Gorge, which runs through the center of the Twin Cities campus. Underground structures were not new to the university. The Civil and Mineral Engineering building, constructed in the 1980s, goes down 7 stories. And here, geological studies confirm that the land along the Mississippi would be an ideal setting for a new underground structure. A layer of limestone that would provide a ceiling for the space, thick and strong enough to support the ground and everything above it. Beneath the limestone, a layer of sandstone that could be easily excavated to clear out a space in which a concrete shell could be constructed. These geological conditions extended for quite a distance along the river and under the campus, leaving open the possibility for future expansion. A radically good idea. Whether it was that concept that caught everyone's imagination, or whether its time had come, construction money for the building was provided by the Minnesota State Legislature in 1996.
We, of course, are so grateful to the support of our legislator friends. Many legislators really went out on a limb for this building because of its design. It is so innovative. As those of you who have toured it know, some legislators had to be convinced that it made sense to put books underground. But they believed us, and they hung with us, and they supported it.
When the construction was finally funded, and we didn't know right up to the last minute whether it was going to be funded, I was taking a trip because we'd finished the drawings and so forth, and I was in Cornwall, and we had some friends visiting us there, and telephone rang, and Susan answered it. She says, "It's for you, James." I said, "Don Kelsey." And Donald said, "It's funded for construction." And I burst out bawling. Here's a 70-year-old guy, 70 plus, crying, as tears are running down my face. It's such joy. I'm sure these friends of ours wondered what the heck was going on, but did somebody die? No, he got funded.
The architect for the project was Stoggeberg Buyer Sachs Incorporated. The original plan called for the excavation and construction of 3 underground caverns, a building above for library operations, and a system of elevators and lifts for transporting people and materials. For budgetary reasons, one of the caverns was eliminated. In July of 1998, the excavation began. This part of the project was the responsibility of C.S. McCrossan, and for nearly a year, crews dug and removed huge amounts of sandstone, about 2.5 million cubic feet. Above the excavated space, a ceiling of solid limestone, 450 million years old, reinforced with 1,000 rock bolts. Below, a floor of sand that would soon be covered with concrete. The outer walls of the cavern were lined with sections of concrete, curved for strength. They were prefabricated on the outside and brought in for installation. Now, an inner concrete shell would be constructed to provide the actual storage chambers. Then the sealing of more sections of prefabricated concrete. To attain complete control of conditions inside the chambers, walls and ceiling were wrapped in rubber on the outside, in effect, turning them into huge, sealed containers. As the project progressed, everyone involved caught the fever of enthusiasm and excitement that the concept had generated.
They certainly did. Everybody involved in the construction of the underground realized it was a very unique thing. Nothing quite like it had been done here and in very few other places in the world for any purpose, let alone an archive, which made this very unique. The thing that enthused them is the fact that it was different meant they didn't have to do it like they did their last job or their last 20 jobs.
But there was a kind of a sense, I think, from the very beginning that this building represented something unusual, something momentous, and it really became a very contagious sort of culture, I think, for the project.
Donald mentioned that I came here at that time with enthusiasm, but who wouldn't, for a building unlike any building in the country. We had the opportunity to do something that's not been done before, at least in this way.
Meanwhile, other crews worked on the elevator shafts. Nearly 5,000 tons of limestone had been blasted and removed to create the access space between the caverns below and the structure on the surface. Though the library would provide about 250,000 square feet of storage, its campus footprint, the above-ground real estate it consumed, was fairly modest.
To be in the center of the campus with those large caverns down here, they both have expansion space, and they're right central to the entire university. If you get up in an airplane and you look down, there it is.
Only a handful of library personnel would have access to the storage areas. But above ground would be several floors of rooms and offices for administration, study and research, processing, cataloging, all the access and operational functions of the library. In the caverns, 2 air handling systems were installed. One for air between the cavern walls and the concrete chambers, and a larger system for handling all the air inside the chambers. The 2 concrete chambers were each approximately the size of 2 football fields, 600 feet long, 65 feet wide, and 23 feet high. When they were ready, shelving was installed. More than 12,000 shelves, each 53 inches wide by 3 feet deep, and 13,000 more shelves in a mezzanine area. In the lower part of the river gorge, with an entrance from the river road, there is an access portal large enough to accommodate semi-trailer trucks for the transport of archival materials in and out. In the early months of the year 2000, it was time to move in materials from many different locations. Carefully packed and indexed, nearly 2 million items were brought in and placed on their assigned shelves. At the same time, items were accessioned into the Minnesota Library Access Center managed by Minitex. Here, books and documents of all sorts would be stored in ideal archival conditions. All materials in acid-free cardboard containers, a constant temperature of 62 degrees, and a controlled humidity of 50%. Constant movement of air to prevent the formation of mildew. And control of light. All the lighting localized. Each bank on a timer that turns off automatically, leaving materials in darkness most of the time. Archival materials are of many sizes, from small books to large blueprints and drawings. It was decided that the most efficient way to organize materials in the Access Center, since they would not be arranged for public browsing, would be by size rather than subject, a range of 10 sizes. It would be like sorting books by color, unless there were some method for efficient retrieval. And there is. Barcodes. There is a computer-generated barcode for each item in the collection, a barcode for each container, and a barcode for the shelf on which it's housed. Upstairs, a patron finds the item in the computer system. The coded information is sent down to a retrieval technician in the storage chambers, who uses the barcodes to locate the item and retrieve the box it is in with a heavy-duty rail-guided forklift. It is sent upstairs for the patron's use, and when the item is ready for reshelving, the process is reversed. The library was planned to serve 2 major programs, and 1 chamber is devoted to each. One program is the Minnesota Library Access Center, a unit administered and managed by the Minitex Library Information Network, which facilitates the sharing of a number of collections between libraries of all types in Minnesota and North and South Dakota. Annually, 350,000 books and magazine articles are loaned and circulated, the largest number of loans by any academic library in North America. The other chamber houses the archives and special collections of the university, each of which has an office in the building above ground, as well as reading and study rooms for researchers, students, and scholars. The collections are grouped thematically into 8 units, some of which may include several collections. The Charles Babbage Institute, devoted to the history of information processing. The Children's Literature Research Collections, which includes the Curlin collection of more than 65,000 children's books, as well as original manuscripts and illustrations, and 4 other basic collections. The Immigration History Research Center, fostering research on American immigration. The Manuscripts Division, housing literary manuscripts, the personal papers and manuscripts of Minnesota authors and poets. The Performing Arts Archives, for the preservation and study of documents related to the history of theater, music, dance, and other associated arts in Minnesota. And the Northwest Architectural Archives, preserving the records of architects, engineers, contractors, and designers from Minnesota and the Midwest. The Social Welfare History Archives, preserving documents relating to social service and social reform. This unit also includes the archives of the Jewish Historical Society of the Upper Midwest. Special Collections, which includes rare and fragile books. The Archie Given Senior Collection of African American Literature, the Sherlock Holmes Collection, the Myrtle Collection on the history of photomechanics, the Robert A. Kahn Collection devoted to Austrian history, the Basil Leordis Modern Greek Collection, the Tel G. Donoff Collection of Swedish Americana, the Topography Collection, devoted to printing and type and book design, the Jean Treader Collection of gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender literature, and the Elmer L. Andersen Collection. The University Archives, maintaining access to historical documents and photos of the University of Minnesota. And the Counts Family YMCA Archives, thousands of books, photos, and memorabilia documenting the history of the YMCA in the United States. A gallery area on the first floor is designed for the safe exhibition of items from any of the collections. The enthusiasm for the building, felt by everyone who helped build it, was shared by all who gathered to see it dedicated.
And what nobler purpose can there be for a university than to gather up the prizes of a culture, preserve them, propagate them, make them available, so that the best of what has gone before can be preserved and built on.